When I think back to 2019, I can't believe how a simple drink in a Manila bar turned into me financially supporting an entire Filipino family of 12 people. I never saw myself as the kind of man who would become a walking ATM for strangers. I was cautious, methodical, always careful with my money, but it turns out even the most prudent people can get swept into something they don't understand. I wasn't stupid. I wasn't even particularly desperate. But I had $287,000 saved up and thought that would be enough to give me a comfortable retirement after years of brutal Canadian winters and loneliness. I thought I'd done my research. I thought I knew better. But here's what I didn't account for. The slow, methodical way a family can embed itself into your life, one emergency at a time, one sob story at a time, until you wake up one morning and realize you're paying rent for people you've never even met. I was 62 when I first retired from my job as a railway logistics coordinator in St. John, New Brunswick. I'd spent 43 years in that city just going through the motions, really. Wake up, work, come home to an empty house, repeat. I felt like I was pretty boring, really. My life was a spreadsheet of predictability. I had $287,000 saved up, although it wasn't a fortune, but I felt optimistic about the future. I'd sold my house in 2018 after my ex-wife finally stopped contesting the divorce settlement. That gave me about $140,000. The rest came from my pension buyout and investments I'd been carefully building since my 30s. I had it structured so I could pull about $2,100 a month without touching the principal, which seemed more than enough for the Philippines. I got married in 1982. We went on to have 2 kids. My marriage was fine for maybe the first 15 years. Then it became tolerating each other. Then it became cold silence. She wanted the house, half my pension, and seemed to want to punish me for being, in her words, emotionally unavailable. The house. Divorce was finalized in 2016. By the time 2018 came around, I was 61 and completely hollowed out. I'd heard people talk about the Philippines, how the cost of living was lower, how life could be easier, and how a man could start fresh. I let myself believe it because I wanted something like that to be true so badly. One of the guys I worked with, Pete, had been going to Manila every winter for 5 years. He'd show me photos of beaches, cheap beer, and always had these stories about how far your dollar went. He never mentioned the complications. Nobody ever does. By the time I turned 62, I started thinking, why was I even staying in St. John? I could retire early, the pension would start immediately, and I had enough saved. I could live there on the money I had. I could have a nice place, a nice girlfriend, and I could be respected for once instead of being the divorced guy everyone pitied at the Legion. I joined a dating site in the Philippines. I forgot what the name of it was, Filipino Cupid or something similar, but it was clear that there were more girls on there than guys. And it was quite interesting to receive messages from girls in their early to mid-20s saying they wanted a serious relationship with someone just like me. I got it that they came from a poor background and needed financial support. I get they wanted a better life, but I wanted a better life as well. And by being with someone like that, I thought I would have a better life. Before long, I started talking to one girl who was from Manila. She was only 27 years old, but it was as if she completely looked past my age and appearance and looked at who I was inside as a person. Her name was Clarissa. She worked at a call center and lived with her mother and siblings in Caloocan. From her photos, she was beautiful, long, dark hair, warm smile, and she wrote in near-perfect English. We talked every single day for about 6 weeks. She'd message me during her lunch breaks, call me on her way home from work, and we'd video chat late into her evening. She told me about her family, about how hard life was, about her dreams of maybe becoming a teacher someday. She asked about Canada, about the snow, about my life. She seemed genuinely interested. It only took me 2 months to decide to go and see her. I booked a one-way ticket to Manila for November 2019. I told myself I'd stay a month, see how things went, and if it worked out, maybe I'd stay longer. If it didn't, I'd come back to Canada and try something else. When I landed at Ninoy Aquino International Airport, Clarissa was waiting at arrivals with a handmade sign that said, "Welcome, Martin," with a heart drawn on it. That moment, seeing her there, seeing that she'd actually shown up, seeing that she'd made an effort, that's when I started to believe this might actually be real. When I called my daughter Sarah and told her that I met someone and she's actually younger than you, I could hear her sigh as if to say, "Here we go, Dad." But I didn't care. She'd been telling me for years I needed to get out more, meet someone, and now that I had, she was suddenly concerned. "Just be careful," she said. "You don't really know her." "I know enough," I told her. "She's different." But even as I said it, part of me knew what the game was in the Philippines. I'd read the forums, seen the warnings from other expats, and part of me had already come to the conclusion that she probably wanted something from me. But I chose to ignore it because, for the first time in years, someone was making me feel wanted. I told myself, as long as I control the money, as long as I set boundaries, it'll be fine. I won't be one of those guys who loses everything. I'm smarter than that. Looking back, that was the exact moment I should have gotten on a plane home. For the first 3 weeks, everything was incredible. We met for coffee in Mall of Asia, walked along Roxas Boulevard, went to restaurants in Makati. I found myself looking forward to seeing her more than I expected. She was affectionate, attentive, and seemed genuinely happy to be with me. After dating for a month, that's when we decided to take things further. She was traveling over 90 minutes each way from Caloocan to meet me in my serviced apartment in Makati, and it just seemed to make sense for her to move in. She could quit the night shift at the call center, we could spend more time together, and I could help her out a bit financially since she wouldn't be working. She was working at the call center and making around $320 a month. I agreed to replace her income and add another $200 for her to send home to her mother for her younger siblings' school expenses. I felt like this was a fair amount, and it would show her I was serious about supporting her while not being taken advantage of. $450 a month seemed reasonable. I was happy to make those changes because a part of me always was looking for a connection and to have someone to go home to in the evenings. We'd cook together. She taught me how to make adobo and sinigang. We'd watch Filipino variety shows I didn't understand, but laughed along with anyway. And we'd go out to malls on weekends. She was patient with my terrible attempts at Tagalog and seemed proud to introduce me to her friends. After we had lived together for 4 months, I had to pull the trigger and ask her to marry me. I wanted to take things further with her, and I felt like she would want the same, which she did. We decided to get married in February 2020. Both excited about it. It was a simple civil ceremony at the municipal hall in Makati. Her mother and 3 siblings came. Nobody from my side attended. Sarah sent a text saying, "Congratulations, Dad. I hope you know what you're doing." After things went smoothly for 6 months, Clarissa started talking about her family's living situation. Her mother, 3 younger siblings, her sister's husband, and their 2 kids were all living in a small 3-room house in Caloocan that her late father had built in the 1992. The roof leaked. The walls had cracks. And during typhoon season, they'd have to evacuate to a neighbor's house. "We need to repair it," she told me one evening. Maybe we could help them. I wasn't about to rush into things, though. I told her I'd think about it. But the more she talked about it, showing me photos of the water damage, telling me about her youngest brother getting sick from the mold, the more it seemed like something that needed to be done. After looking around for about a month at different contractors and getting quotes, I settled on a renovation plan that seemed to offer everything they needed. I looked at similar renovation projects online, talked to an expat at a coffee shop who'd done something similar, and the costs seemed reasonable for the Philippines. The quote was $18,500 for materials and labor to essentially rebuild the house. New roof, new walls, proper plumbing, electrical upgrades. I told Clarissa we'd do it, but I wanted to be clear this was a one-time thing. This was to help her family get stable, and after this, they'd need to manage on their own. She agreed immediately, kissed me, thanked me, said her family would be so grateful. I sold $18,500 worth of my investments and transferred the money to the contractor Clarissa's brother-in-law recommended. The work started in June 2020, right as COVID lockdowns were starting to ease a bit in Metro Manila. The contractor sent photos every week showing progress, new posts going up, roofing materials delivered, bags of cement stacked in the yard. After 3 months, the house looked completely transformed. I went to see it once it was finished, And I'll admit, it felt good. Clarissa's mother hugged me, her siblings thanked me, and for a moment, I felt like I'd actually done something meaningful. I should have stopped there. 2 months after the house was finished, Clarissa came to me with a new request. Her brother, the second youngest at 19, wanted to go to university to study engineering. The local state university was affordable, but there were fees for registration, books, and a laptop he'd need for his coursework. I asked. $1,200 for the first year, she said. It would change his life. I thought about it. Education seemed like a legitimate investment. If I helped him get a degree, maybe he'd get a good job and help support the family, taking pressure off me in the long run. That was my rationalization at the time. I transferred $1,200. Clarissa showed me the registration confirmation, photos of him on campus, pictures of the laptop. Everything seemed legitimate. Then came the car. In December 2020, Clarissa told me her brother-in-law, the one married to her older sister, needed a vehicle to start a small delivery business. He'd been driving a tricycle for years, but if he had a small van, he could do larger deliveries, make more money, and contribute more to the household. How much would a vehicle cost? I asked, already dreading the answer. Maybe $8,000 for a good used van. Part of me wanted to say no, but Clarissa explained that her sister's family was struggling, that they had 2 kids to feed, and that this could actually generate income instead of just being an expense. That last part convinced me it wasn't charity, it was an investment. I used savings and purchased an 8-year-old Toyota Hiace for $7,800. The vehicle was registered in her brother-in-law's name, since I couldn't own a vehicle as a foreigner without jumping through complicated hoops. He started doing deliveries for local businesses around Caloocan. For the first few months, it seemed to be going well. But that's when the real requests started accelerating. 2 months after the van purchase, Clarissa told me her mother needed a medical procedure, something with her gallbladder. The public hospital had a long wait list, but a private clinic could do it immediately for $2,400. I swallowed my pride and sent it. 3 weeks after that, her younger sister needed $600 for enrollment fees at a vocational school. I sent it. A month later, the house's water pump broke, and they needed $350 to replace it. I sent it. Then came the electricity bill crisis. They'd fallen behind during COVID and owed $580. I sent it. Every time, though, I told myself I was going to say no. Every time, Clarissa would bring it up gently at first, then more persistently. She'd mention how stressed her mother was, how embarrassed her siblings felt, how they'd never ask if it wasn't serious. And every time, I gave in because I couldn't bear the thought of having a miserable woman next to me ruining my life. Before we were married, Clarissa never asked for anything from me. She was happy and content, just being able to eat at nice restaurants and go to the movies. But when we were married, I could feel like she was more comfortable, but not comfortable. In a positive way, comfortable in a negative way. Like she knew I couldn't leave easily. Like she had leverage now. By mid-2021, I'd already spent $18,500 on the house, $7,800 on the vehicle, $1,200 on her brother's education, and at least $5,000 in various emergencies. The $450 monthly support had crept up to around $700 because there was always something extra: medicine, school supplies, food for a family gathering, a phone that broke. I was burning through about $8,500 a month when I'd planned for $2,100. We lived in Makati in a modest 1-bedroom apartment I rented for $420 a month. The routine was simple enough. I'd wake up, have coffee at a local cafe, maybe go to the gym, meet Clarissa for lunch, and then we'd spend evenings together. I was starting to enjoy aspects of it: the weather, the affordable meals, the sense that my money went further. But when we went to Caloocan to visit her family, which happened almost every weekend, I felt the weight of what I was supporting. The house I'd renovated was always full. 12 people lived there now. Clarissa's mother, her 3 younger siblings, her older sister with her husband and 2 kids, and her aunt and 2 cousins who'd moved in temporarily after losing their rental place. One thing I noticed very quickly being in the Philippines was how communal family was. Nobody lived alone. Success was measured by how many people you could support. And I was starting to realize that, by marrying Clarissa, I'd essentially married her entire extended family. I tried to integrate. I learned basic Tagalog phrases, attended family gatherings where I was the only foreigner, and attempted to navigate the complex web of relationships and obligations. Everyone was friendly to my face, but I started noticing patterns. Conversations would stop when I entered a room. Clarissa would have long, hushed phone calls with her mother, and there was always another situation that needed money. I thought I could manage it, set boundaries, be generous but not stupid. But underneath, I already knew I was caught in something I just couldn't pull myself out of. By July 2021, I'd already spent $39,000 beyond what I'd planned. I had about $248,000 remaining in my accounts. My original plan was to live on investment returns and only pull about $2,100 monthly. Instead, I was draining $8,500 a month with no end in sight. I told myself $2,500 a month would be enough to cover Clarissa, me, and reasonable family support. But within 6 months of getting married, it was closer to $8,500. And no matter how many times I looked at the figures, I couldn't explain where it was all going. It was breaking down like this: our rent and utilities, $520. Our food and personal expenses, $800. Monthly support to her mother, $700. Emergency, family requests, $400. $1,200 per month. Her personal expenses, salon, clothes, phone, $300. Unexpected medical bills, $200, $600 per month. Holiday and birthday obligations, $400. And there were nights where I gave in when I didn't want to, like when her brother-in-law said the van needed $900 in repairs, or when her mother needed $550 for property taxes I didn't know existed. One evening in August 2021, I sat Clarissa down and told her it couldn't go on like this, that the budget was $3,000 a month maximum, and there was no more. I tried to make it sound firm but fair, and I told her that if we wanted to have any kind of future together, we had to stick to it. She nodded and didn't argue, but I could tell she wasn't happy. Her face went cold, and she said, "So you want my family to suffer?" "That's not what I'm saying. You have so much money, and you won't help my family." "I've already helped your family more than... You're so selfish." That word selfish coming from her, after everything I'd paid for, felt like being punched. I didn't know how to respond. Every request after that turned into an argument. Every peso questioned turned into me being accused of not caring, not understanding Filipino culture, not loving her. And I found myself second-guessing whether I was the one being unreasonable. Maybe I was being stingy. Maybe this was just how it worked here. Maybe I was the problem. But the budget kept getting destroyed every single month. Things did change when we got married in a way I wasn't expecting. Before we got married, Clarissa was affectionate, grateful, and never made demands. After we got married, I could feel like she was more comfortable asking. No, not asking. Expecting me to provide whatever her family needed. The pattern was clear. First request, $450 monthly support for my mother and siblings. I had no problem with it. It wasn't a lot of money, and it seemed reasonable. Second request, $2,400 for her mother's medical procedure. She's in pain every day. 2 months later, I swallowed my pride and sent it because I didn't want to be responsible for her mother suffering. Third request, $1,800 for her brother's second-year tuition and books. He's doing so well, we can't let him drop out now. I regret agreeing because it opened the floodgates. But I did. The frequency was accelerating. It went from monthly to every 2 weeks to weekly. There was always something, always another emergency, always another person in the family who needed help. Lo and behold, 3 weeks later, and the family wants more money. Always about the family. But the worst part wasn't the money, it was how she started treating me. Before, she'd cook for me, we'd go out together, she'd show affection. After the wedding, she stopped initiating anything. She'd spend hours on her phone video calling her family. When I'd try to plan a date or suggest we do something together, She'd say she was tired, or that we needed to save money right after asking me to send $600 to fix something at her mother's house. Her physical affection disappeared almost entirely. We went from being intimate regularly to maybe once a month. When I'd bring it up, she'd say she was stressed about her family's problems, that she couldn't think about that when her mother was sick or her siblings needed help. I started noticing other things too. She'd lock her phone when I came near. She'd take calls in the other room. She'd spend entire weekends at her family's house without inviting me. When I did go to Caloocan, she'd barely translate conversations, leaving me sitting there like a foreigner ATM. One afternoon in October 2021, I asked her directly, "Did you marry me because you love me, or because I can support your family?" She looked at me like I'd asked the stupidest question in the world. "Both," she said. "In the Philippines, if you love someone, you help their family. You don't understand our culture." It wasn't that I couldn't afford it at that point. I still had over $210,000 left. It was just that I thought we were in a genuine relationship and that she loved me, and if she did, she wouldn't turn every conversation into a negotiation about money. But that's exactly what every conversation had become. I wasn't looking at her the same way anymore. The trust was broken. Not by one big thing, but by 1,000 small realizations that I was a resource to be managed, not a partner to be loved. Every conversation felt transactional. Every moment together felt like she was mentally calculating what she could ask for next. I was quite friendly with one expat who was in a similar situation, Australian guy named Greg, who'd married a woman from Caloocan. And when I told him I'd renovated her family's house, bought a vehicle, and was sending money monthly, I remember him just shaking his head saying, "Mate, you're in too deep. That's never going to stop. They'll bleed you dry and then move on to the next one." I just didn't want to hear it, though. By the time November 2021 rolled around, I'd burned through about $50,000 in a year and a half. I knew I couldn't keep draining my savings anymore. At this rate, I'd be broke in 4 years. And then what? Go back to Canada with nothing? Work at 70 years old stocking shelves? I tried to set boundaries. I told Clarissa we needed to talk seriously about finances. I showed her a spreadsheet. I'd actually made a spreadsheet showing income versus expenses. I explained that at the current burn rate, we'd have problems. She looked at the spreadsheet for about 10 seconds and said, "You're so worried about money. Money isn't everything. It is when we don't have any left. We have plenty. You always say we don't have money, but then you have money. That's my retirement savings, Clarissa. That's supposed to last me until I die. You're not going to die soon. You're healthy." That conversation went nowhere. She didn't see a problem with the spending because, from her perspective, the money was there. Her family needed help, and I was being selfish by not providing it. To her, I was a 6-7-year-old foreign man with hundreds of thousands of dollars, complaining about spending a few thousand to help people who had nothing. I couldn't make her understand that there was a difference between having money and being able to sustain indefinite financial drain. I started feeling trapped. I'd married her, which meant leaving would be complicated and expensive. I was living in her country, where I had no real legal protections. All the major things I'd paid for were either in her family's possession or her name. If I left, I'd have nothing to show for the $50,000 I'd spent. Every day I felt more isolated, more stupid, and more certain that I'd made the worst decision of my life. In January 2022, Clarissa told me we needed to go to Caloocan because there was a family emergency. She wouldn't tell me what it was over the phone, just that we needed to go immediately. When we arrived at her mother's house, the house I'd paid $18,500 to renovate the entire family was there. Her mother, siblings, her sister's family, the aunt and cousins, everyone. They were sitting in the living room, and the atmosphere was tense. Clarissa's mother started speaking in rapid Tagalog. I caught maybe every 10th word. Clarissa wasn't translating. I sat there feeling like an outsider in a situation I was apparently central to. Finally, Clarissa turned to me and said, "We need $6,000. "For what?" More Tagalog conversation. Then Clarissa said, "The house. They need money for the house." "What do you mean?" "I already paid to renovate the house. They need to expand it. Too many people. Not enough rooms. I looked around. The house had 3 bedrooms. There were 12 people living there. Yes, it was crowded, but Clarissa, I'm not paying to expand the house. We've already spent too much. Her mother started crying. Her siblings looked at me with these wounded expressions. Clarissa's voice rose. They need help. We need to help them. I've been helping them for a year and a half. I've spent, it's not enough. That phrase, it's not enough, echoed in my head. After $50,000, after the house, the van, the medical bills, the tuition, the endless emergencies, it still wasn't enough. I refused. I told them I couldn't afford it. I told them we needed to stick to a budget. I told them this was unsustainable. That's when Clarissa dropped the real bomb. If you don't help, I'm leaving you. I'll go back to my family, and you'll have nothing. It was the first time she'd made an explicit threat, and it was the first time I realized she'd been thinking about this, about what leverage she had, about what would happen if I stopped paying. I left the house. I walked out and caught a jeepney back to Makati by myself. Clarissa didn't follow me. When I got back to the apartment, I sat on the bed and started going through bank statements on my laptop. That's when I started seeing things that didn't add up. I'd sent $1,200 for her brother's university tuition. But when I searched online for the university's fee structure, first-year engineering was only $680 per year. Where did the other $520 go? I'd sent $2,400 for her mother's gallbladder surgery. I looked up the private clinic she'd supposedly gone to. The procedure cost $1,600. Where was the other $800? I'd sent $900 for van repairs. I called the shop listed on the receipt Clarissa had shown me. They'd never heard of her brother-in-law, and the receipt number didn't exist in their system. I started going through every single transaction, every single receipt Clarissa had shown me, every single emergency. It turned out not long after that, at least 40% of the money I'd sent for specific things had never been used for those things. I couldn't prove exactly where it went, but the pattern was clear. Inflated costs, fake receipts, and money disappearing into her family's general fund or her personal account. When Clarissa came back to the apartment that evening, I confronted her. Where did the money really go? What are you talking about? The tuition was $680, not $1,200. The surgery was $1,600, not $2,400. The van repair receipt is fake. Her face went pale, then red. Then she started crying. You're checking receipts. You don't trust me? Should I? Everything I did was for my family. You lied to me. I didn't lie. Things cost money. There are other expenses. What other expenses? She wouldn't answer. She just kept crying and saying I didn't understand, that I was being cruel, that Filipino families needed support, and that I was being a terrible husband. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay there next to her, this person I'd married, and realized I didn't know her at all. I'd been systematically deceived for over a year, and I'd willingly participated because I wanted to believe I'd found love. The next morning, I checked my bank balance, $198,000 left. I'd started with $287,000. I'd burned through $89,000 in 18 months. By the time January 2022 hit, I looked at my account and did the math. Opening amount. I had started with $287,000 when I moved to the Philippines in November 2019. Itemized. Losses. House renovation, $18,500. Vehicle purchase, $7,800. University tuition, year 1 and 2, $2,100. Mother's surgery, $2,400. Monthly family support, $450, $700, divided by month, times 18 months, equals $10,800. Emergency requests, verify, $8,200. Emergency requests, suspicious, divided by, unverify, $12,500. Living expenses higher than planned, $26,700 total spent. $89,000. When I broke down what I'd actually gotten back from the properties and assets, it was devastating. Remaining assets, savings left, $198,000. Property owned, none. House in her mother's name. Vehicle owned, none. In brother-in-law's name. Income, $1,840. Month, pension. What was recoverable? Nothing. I owned nothing. Everything I'd paid for was in someone else's name. The house belonged to her mother. The van was registered to her brother-in-law. Even the furniture I'd bought for the apartment was technically Clarissa's since we lived together, and she'd claim it was hers. I'd spent $89,000 over 18 months and had nothing physical to show for it except a depleted bank account and a wife who threatened to leave me when I wouldn't give her more. The emotional weight of seeing those numbers was crushing. I'd spent a year and a half of my life giving up $89,000 over and above what we'd agreed on in the early stages of our relationship. What a nightmare it was. The fact that she'd systematically inflated costs, provided fake receipts, and manipulated me into giving more than necessary, instead of just being honest about what her family needed. I'd have probably gone along with it. But she went behind my back and basically stole my money for 18 months. Everything I paid for was in her family's names. House, land worth, $18,500, appreciated to maybe $22,000. Van worth, $7,800, depreciated to maybe $6,000. Other property, $0. Total value they kept, $28,000 in assets, plus another $61,000 in cash that disappeared into various accounts and expenses. I had no claim over any of it, other than the fact it belonged to my wife's family. But did I really want her to be my wife now, after what I'd learned? After the confrontation, I told Clarissa I needed space to think. I checked into a hotel in Makati, nothing fancy, just a basic place for $28 a night. I didn't know if I should just return to Canada immediately, or if I should try to salvage anything from this situation. I thought about my options. Go back to Canada. Start over at 67 with $198,000. Stay in the Philippines, divorce Clarissa, live alone. Try to make the marriage work with strict boundaries. I'm thinking, realistically, option 3 is impossible. She's already shown she'll lie, manipulate, and threaten me. And option 2 means I've spent $89,000 for 18 months of fake companionship. But option 1 means admitting complete defeat and going back to the loneliness and cold I tried to escape. Clarissa tried everything to fix it. She showed up at the hotel crying, saying she was sorry, that she'd never lie again, that she loved me. She tried hugging me, kissing me, saying she'd change. I just told her it was over. You can have the apartment until the lease is up. You can keep whatever's in there. But it's over. She switched from apologies to anger in seconds. You're abandoning me? After everything? After everything I paid for, you mean? I gave you companionship. I gave you love. You were lonely and I saved you. You lied to me for a year and a half. Everyone lies to foreigners. You're so stupid. You think you're the only one. You think any Filipina actually loves old men like you? We do what we have to do. And there it was, the truth. Finally. Not spoken in a moment of tenderness, but in anger. The mask completely off. My idea was to make sure her visa situation was handled, get back to Canada, and protect what remained of my savings before she could claim anything in a divorce. I consulted with a lawyer who specialized in foreigner. Marriages cost me $400 just for the consultation. And he explained that since we'd been married less than 2 years and I could prove financial deception, I had a decent case for annulment or quick divorce without substantial asset division. 3 weeks later, after arranging flights and packing my things, Clarissa showed up one last time. She wasn't crying this time. She was calm. I just want you to know, she said. My family really did need the money. We're not bad people. You just don't understand how hard life is here. I understand, I said. I just wish you'd been honest. If I was honest, you wouldn't have given as much. She was probably right. When I got to Ninoy Aquino International Airport for my flight back to Canada, I felt a mix of relief and devastation. Relief that I was getting out before losing everything. Devastation that I'd wasted 18 months and $89,000 on something that was never real. Looking back at Manila from the plane window as we took off, I tried to remember what I'd felt when I first arrived, that hope, that optimism, that belief that I could start over. It felt like a lifetime ago. The flight home felt like punishment, not for the money I'd lost, but for all the time I'd wasted convincing myself everything was real. Back in St. John, I had no choice but to start over from the bottom. I'd sold my house before leaving, so I moved into a one-bedroom apartment that cost $850 a month. It was small, cold, and depressing after the space and warmth of the Philippines. My new reality. Living situation. One-bedroom apartment in St. John. Financial situation. $198,000 remaining, down from $287,000. Work situation. One-bedroom apartment in St. Living on $1,840. Month pension. No longer enough after depleting savings. Age factor. 67 years old. Too old to rebuild what I lost. I'm 67. Living alone again, and only $1,840 a month to live on. You can't live on that in Canada. You should be able to, but you can't. After rent, utilities, food, and basic expenses, I was in the red every month. I had to start pulling from my remaining savings just to survive exactly what I'd tried to avoid by moving to the Philippines in the first place. The anger has never left me, and the bitterness stayed in everything I did. And all I could think was that I traded away my financial security and the last chance I had for retirement for something that was never real in the first place. I always think back to what I did and the time I had there with her. And if only she was honest from the start, if only she'd told me exactly what her family needed without lying and inflating costs, things would have turned out like they should have done. I would have helped. I would have been reasonable. And I hate her for it. I hate myself more, but I hate the fact that she knew exactly what she was doing, knew I was vulnerable, and exploited it methodically for 18 months. If I could do it over, I would have done everything differently. Never put property in someone else's name. Even if you're married, even if you trust them, protect yourself legally. I should have accepted I couldn't own land and simply not bought any instead of putting it in her family's name. Set firm financial boundaries from the start. I should have said, I'll provide $X per month for family support, no more, no exceptions, and actually stuck to it. Listen when family and friends warn you. My daughter Sarah saw through it immediately. Greg, the Australian expat, told me I was in too deep. I ignored everyone who cared about me because I wanted to believe I'd found something special. Don't ignore red flags. The first time Clarissa showed me a receipt that seemed high, I should have verified it. The first time she threatened to leave when I said no, I should have let her leave. Keep emergency money completely separate. I should have had $50,000 in an account she didn't know about, couldn't access, and that was for absolute emergencies only. That safety net would have given me power. I do feel fortunate to still have $198,000 left. Some men in my situation end up completely broke. I've heard stories of expats who lost everything, who had to be repatriated by their embassies because they couldn't even afford a flight home. Compared to them, I got out early. But knowing I could have had $287,000, which would have given me $2,100 a month indefinitely, versus now having to slowly drain my remaining savings to survive, it's hard not to feel like I've failed completely at retirement. I'm back in Canada, single again, back in the cold. I'm not dating. I don't think I could trust anyone after this. Every time I see a young woman with an older man, I wonder if she's running the same game Clarissa ran on me. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. I'm currently still living in St. John, in the same one-bedroom apartment I moved into when I got back in February 2022. It's adequate. Quiet building, decent neighborhood, but it's not home. After the warmth and energy of Manila, coming back to Canadian winters feels like being sent to a grey purgatory. My exact current finances, savings, $186,000 down from $198,000 when I returned, as I've had to supplement pension monthly. Monthly income, $1,000. $840. From pension property owned. None. Debt. None. I started with $287,000, which would have given me $2,100 a month indefinitely without touching principal. But I don't think you can look back at things and wonder too hard what would have been if I did things differently. It'll drive you crazy. My current routine is simple. Wake up, have coffee, go to the gym 3 times a week to stay mobile, read at the library, sometimes meet the guys at the Legion for cheap beer on Thursdays. I'm not working. At 69 years old now, nobody's hiring me for anything meaningful, and I don't need the humiliation of applying anyway. Socially, I've mostly withdrawn. My daughter Sarah checks in once a month. We have awkward phone conversations where she doesn't say, "I told you so," but we both know she wants to. I've made peace with the fact that I damaged that relationship by ignoring her warnings. I do know now that my wife, she is still my wife on paper. We never finalized the divorce because I couldn't afford the legal fees to do it internationally. Is apparently still living in Manila. A mutual expat friend told me she got a job at a different call center and moved out of her mother's house finally. She has apparently tried contacting me twice through Facebook, but I blocked her. I don't need to hear whatever justification or request for more money she has. She would have been in a lot better position if she'd just been honest from the start, but she didn't, and therefore, she's not. I imagine her family is still living in that house I paid to renovate, still driving that van I bought. I hope they're at least using it well. Someone should get value from my $89,000. The Philippines itself is a beautiful country, and I'm sure, in fact, I'm guaranteed that there are real and genuine people there, and there are genuine relationships between foreigners and Filipinos. But there are also people like Clarissa who see vulnerable foreign men as resources to be extracted, who view relationships as transactions, and who get very good at manipulation because it works. I'm not saying everybody's like that. In fact, I know most people aren't, but there are enough that you need to be more careful than I was. I'm telling this story because I want other people out there, other guys out there, to know what can happen. How easy it could be to lose so much money when you think with, let's just call it your heart instead of your head. I didn't think I was naive. I was a grown man in his 60 seconds. I thought I knew better, but I got played right from the start just as easily as anyone else. The scheme was just slower than I expected, not a single big scam, but death by 1,000 cuts. $450 here, $2,400 there, until I'd bled out $89,000 without even realizing it was happening. Here are the red flags I ignored that you shouldn't. When family emergencies happen monthly, real emergencies are rare. If there's a crisis every few weeks, someone is manufacturing crises. When receipts don't match actual costs, always verify. Call the hospital, check the university website. Don't just trust a piece of paper with numbers on it. When she threatens to leave if you don't give money, that's not love, that's extortion. Real partners work through financial stress together. They don't weaponize the relationship. When you're paying for people you've never met. I was sending money for nieces, nephews, cousins, and extended family I never even saw. That should have been a massive red flag. If you see your girlfriend or wife's family expecting you to fund their entire lifestyle, walk away. If you see receipts that seem inflated, verify them. And most importantly, never put property or vehicles in someone else's name, no matter how much you trust them. When the relationship ends, and statistically it probably will, you'll have nothing. 3 years ago, I thought I was building a new life in the Philippines with a woman who loved me. I thought I'd found a way to make my retirement savings last while having companionship and warmth after a cold, lonely divorce. 3 years later, I'm back in St. John, alone again, $101,000 poorer, and no closer to the life I wanted. I've seen so many people since 2019 come to the Philippines with all the best intentions in the world, fall in love with a younger woman, pour money into her family, and end up right where I am, broke, bitter, and back in their home country, and they're the ones who have to live with the consequences while she moves on to the next foreign benefactor. The fact that I still have $186,000 left and didn't lose everything like some expats I've heard about, that's got to be good enough for me. I know guys who lost literally everything, their entire retirement, their houses, Even took out loans they're now repaying in their 70 seconds. Compared to them, I'm lucky. Even after all that happened, I wouldn't say I regret going to the Philippines. I regret trusting Clarissa. I regret not setting boundaries. I regret being so desperate for companionship that I ignored every warning sign. But I don't regret trying to find happiness. I just wish I'd been smarter about it. The Philippines was the country that I always thought represented possibility. It was a country I wanted to retire to peacefully and build something with someone. I thought the low cost of living and the friendly culture would give me a second chance at life. I quickly realized that friendly culture can also mean obligation culture, where saying no makes you the villain, and a foreigner's bank account is seen as a family resource, not personal property. I thought I was helping a family in need by paying for a house renovation, a vehicle, and medical expenses. But what actually happened was I bankrolled 12 people's lifestyle for 18 months while being systematically lied to about where the money was really going. The worst part is, if she'd just been honest, told me her family needed X amount per month and that's what it cost to support them, I probably would have agreed to a reasonable amount. Just make better decisions if you want to do the same. Set boundaries. Verify everything. And don't let loneliness make you stupid. You have been warned.